A blue sphere drifting through endless darkness, wrapped in cloud and fire, untouched by history. Its continents were wild and raw, its seas deep and uncharted, its skies glowing with the light of a young sun. No footsteps crossed its plains. No voices echoed through its valleys. It was a world of potential waiting. And somewhere far beyond the edges of this sky, beyond the thin veil of space that humans would one day call the heavens, a far older world was dying. Its name was Nibiru. Nibiru was not like Earth. It was a wandering world, a planet that traveled on a long and lonely path through the darkness between stars. It was ancient beyond measure, its civilization older than any dream humanity would ever have. But even great worlds are not eternal. Nibiru was fading, its skies were thinning, its atmosphere was weakening, and its rulers, the beings later remembered on Earth as the Anunnaki, knew their home could not survive much longer without help. They searched the cosmos. Through instruments of light and consciousness, through technologies that bent space itself, they scanned the galaxy for a world that could save them. And at last they found Earth, a young planet rich in oceans, metals, and living potential. A world filled with gold deep beneath its crust, a substance that on Nibiru could heal a dying sky. So the decision was made. The Anunnaki would leave their ancient home and journey across the vast black sea of space. They would come to Earth, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as planners and builders and rulers. And when their great ships descended through the clouds of this young world, Earth's silent age came to an end. They arrived like falling stars. Shining vessels broke through the sky, scattering fire and light as they slowed their descent. Oceans shimmered beneath them. Mountains cast long shadows. Storms curled away from their passage as if the planet itself felt their presence. The Anunnaki were tall, radiant beings, their forms both physical and luminous, as though matter and energy had learned to exist as one. Their eyes carried the memory of distant suns. Their minds held libraries of lost worlds. They stepped onto Earth's soil and felt something they had not felt in many ages. Hope. This planet was not empty. It was alive. Its forests breathed. Its seas moved with rhythm. Its winds whispered across endless plains. Even the stones beneath their feet held ancient stories written in mineral and fire. Earth was not merely a resource, it was a world with a spirit, and that made everything more complicated. The Anunnaki knew they could not simply take. They would need to govern, they would need order, they would need a plan, so they built their first great city at the meeting of rivers where fertile lands stretched as far as the eye could see. Towers of crystal and stone rose from the ground. Platforms of glowing metal floated above the soil. Energy hummed through the air like a distant choir. This place would become the heart of their new world, and here the first council of Earth was called. The greatest of the Anunnaki gathered in a vast hall whose ceiling reflected the stars. They came not as equals, but as forces of nature given form. Anu, the supreme ruler, whose voice carried the weight of galaxies. Enlil, lord of the air and command, fierce and unyielding. Enki, master of wisdom and waters, whose mind could shape life itself. Ninhursag, the Great Mother, guardian of biology and birth. Udu, keeper of light and law. Inanna, spirit of power, desire, and transformation. They stood around a map of Earth, not a simple drawing, but a living projection of the planet itself. Continents glowed, oceans moved, rivers pulsed with light. Anu spoke first. "This world will become our refuge," he said, "but it must not become our battlefield." He knew what happened when gods fought over land. Nibiru's own history was filled with wars that had scarred its surface and fractured its people. Earth could not become another Nibiru, so Anu proposed something radical. They would divide the planet, not as thieves dividing spoils, but as stewards dividing responsibility. Each great Anunnaki would be given dominion over a region of Earth. They would oversee its development, its resources, and eventually its people. This would prevent chaos. Or so they believed, the council agreed, and so began the first great partition of Earth. The glowing world map shifted. Energy lines spread across the continents, tracing mountains, rivers, and deserts. Natural boundaries formed, oceans, ranges of stone, vast plains, and fertile valleys. Enlil claimed the lands of the air, high plateaus, great skies, and regions where storms were born. He would rule the winds, the clouds, and the laws that governed order. Enki took the waters, the seas, the rivers, the underground currents that flowed unseen. He would become the keeper of life, of secrets, and of creation. Ninhursag was given the fertile lands, the valleys where plants would grow and animals would flourish. She would shape the biology of Earth itself. Udu was entrusted with regions of light and time where law and cycles would be established. Inanna chose the crossroads, places of trade, movement, and power, where cultures would one day rise and clash. Each Anunnaki accepted their domain, but even as the lines were drawn, something ancient stirred, because Earth was not truly empty. It had life, primitive, yes, but alive. And Enki, gazing at the swirling waters and microbial worlds beneath them, began to see something more, possibility. He turned to the council. "This planet does not merely need rulers," he said softly. "It needs caretakers and perhaps companions." The others looked at him with curiosity and suspicion. Enki was always the dreamer, and dreams among the Anunnaki were dangerous things. For it was Enki who would soon suggest the greatest and most controversial act in the history of Earth, the creation of humanity. But that is where our story truly begins. Enki did not speak of his idea again in the open halls of the council. Not yet. Among the Anunnaki, creation was not a simple act. It was power itself. To create a new form of life was to alter the balance of existence. Enki knew that if he proposed it too boldly, Enlil would shut it down before the thought had time to take root. So instead, Enki went down beneath the shining cities, down beneath the platforms of light, down into the deep laboratories carved into the living rock of Earth. These chambers had once been magma tunnels, ancient veins of fire beneath the crust. Now they were filled with quiet blue light, flowing water, and the hum of advanced instruments older than human imagination. Here, Enki studied Earth. He watched its oceans swirl. He examined the microbes drifting through its waters. He observed the tiny creatures that crawled across its land. Life was already here, but it was slow, fragile, blind. Yet within it, Enki saw a pattern, DNA, a universal code that could be shaped like clay. And within Earth's primitive creatures, he found a foundation that could support something greater. Enki did not want servants. He wanted collaborators, beings who could think, build, and remember. Beings who could one day inherit the planet when the Anunnaki were gone. So he began to experiment. With the help of Ninhursag, whose knowledge of biological form was unmatched, Enki blended Earth's native life with the genetic patterns of the Anunnaki themselves. Not to create gods, but to create something in between, a bridge between worlds. The first prototypes were unstable. Some could not breathe Earth's air, others grew too quickly and collapsed. Some were intelligent but lacked bodies strong enough to survive. Many forms were created and quietly ended, until one day in a chamber glowing with soft golden light, a new being opened its eyes. It stood upright, it breathed steadily, its gaze held awareness. It was human, not yet the humans of today, but the first of their kind. Enki felt something stir within him that he had not felt since the ancient days of Nibiru. Pride, but Enlil would not feel the same. The council learned of Enki's creation, the hall filled with tension like gathering thunder. "You have crossed a boundary," Enlil said, his voice sharp as cutting wind. "This world was divided for stewardship, not for experiments." "These beings will serve the planet," Enki replied calmly. They will cultivate it, understand it, and preserve it. They will help us, or they will grow beyond us, Enlil countered. And then what? Anu listened in silence. He saw both futures, so a compromise was made. Humans would exist, but they would be placed within the divided domains of the Anunnaki. Each region of Earth would raise its own human cultures, shaped subtly by the Anunnaki who govern that land. Thus, the division of Earth became more than borders of stone and sea. It became a division of civilizations. Under Enlil's skies, humans became disciplined, hierarchical, devoted to law and order. Under Enki's waters, they became curious, inventive, seekers of knowledge. In Ninhursag's fertile lands, they became farmers and healers. In Inanna's crossroads, they became traders, warriors, lovers, and kings. Each culture worshipped its own gods, never realizing they were all part of the same family. For a time, the system worked. Gold was mined, cities were built, earth flourished, but power is never content. Some Anunnaki began to believe their domains were richer, more productive, more worthy than others. Enlil looked upon Enki's regions and saw growing human intelligence and feared it. Inanna saw her cities swell with influence and desired more. Even among gods, jealousy is a quiet poison. The ancient borders began to blur, and then came the flood, not as punishment but as reset. Enlil, believing humanity had grown too unruly, released the waters of the sky. Ice melted, oceans rose, cities drowned, entire domains were erased beneath waves. Only those warned by Enki survived. And when the waters receded, the world had changed. The old divisions were gone, but their echoes remain, hidden in continents, in cultures, in the way humanity still fights over lines on a map. For the Anunnaki may no longer walk the earth, but their ancient partition still shapes it. When the floodwaters finally withdrew, Earth did not return to what it had been. The oceans settled into new shapes. Rivers carved new paths through broken land. Mountains rose where seas had once been. The ancient cities of the Anunnaki lay buried beneath layers of silt and stone, their shining towers swallowed by time. What had once been a carefully ordered world, divided by divine design, had become a planet of fractured memory. And the Anunnaki themselves, they remained, but not as they once were. The flood had not only reshaped Earth, it had changed the balance of power among the gods. Enlil, who had unleashed the waters, was now feared by both humans and Anunnaki alike. Many saw him as a destroyer, a god who would rather erase life than risk losing control over it. His domain of sky and storm grew darker, more distant, as though the clouds themselves no longer trusted him. Enki, who had quietly saved a remnant of humanity, became a secret guardian. He withdrew from the grand halls of rulership and moved into hidden places beneath rivers, within mountains, and in deep caverns where ancient machines still hummed. He no longer sought to rule Earth. He sought to protect it from his own kind. Ninhursag focused on healing. The world was wounded, species had been lost, lands had been ruined. She guided life back into balance, whispering growth into soil and strength into fragile creatures. Inanna, ever restless, walked among the human survivors. She took many forms, appearing as a warrior, a queen, a lover, a goddess of fire and beauty. Through her, new cultures rose from the ashes of the old ones. Anu watched from afar. Nibiru still needed Earth's gold, the Anunnaki still needed this planet, but now they were divided, and division, even among gods, leads to silence and then to war. Humanity, scattered across the reshaped Earth, began again. Small groups formed tribes, tribes became villages, villages grew into cities. Each new civilization unknowingly inherited fragments of the old Anunnaki domains. In the river valleys of Enki, humans learned writing, astronomy, and engineering. In the stormlands of Enlil, humans built empires based on obedience and hierarchy. In the fertile plains of Ninhursag, agriculture and medicine flourished. In Inanna's crossroads, trade, conflict, and culture collided. The ancient borders were invisible but still active, and the Anunnaki still watched, from hidden sanctuaries, from structures buried beneath deserts, from orbiting stations cloaked in shadow. They had not abandoned Earth, they had simply stepped back, waiting. For centuries, humans believed the gods had left, but sometimes in dreams, in sudden flashes of inspiration, in visions that felt too vast to belong to one mind, the Anunnaki whispered. They guided kings, they inspired prophets, they steered the rise and fall of empires, all while the planet continued to be quietly divided. But even the gods could not hide forever. As humanity grew, it began to uncover ancient ruins that did not match its own history. Stone structures older than any known civilization, carved tablets speaking of beings who came from the sky, legends of gods who walked among mortals. The truth was resurfacing, and Enlil saw the danger. Humanity was remembering. If humans learned they were not alone, that they were shaped by beings beyond Earth, that the world itself had once been ruled by celestial lords, they might no longer obey. So Enlil began to interfere. He influenced certain rulers to destroy knowledge. He encouraged religions that erased the old gods. He turned humans against one another, ensuring they would never unite long enough to uncover their true origins. The world fractured into competing beliefs, borders, and wars. The ancient division of Earth became political, cultural, and violent, and through it all the Anunnaki remained in the shadows. Enki watched with sorrow. He had hoped humanity would become something more. Instead, it had become a reflection of the gods themselves, divided, ambitious, and fearful. But still, there was hope. For within humanity, something existed that the Anunnaki lacked, the ability to change. And as the stars turned and time moved forward, a moment approached when the old order would no longer hold. A moment when the forgotten rulers of Earth would be forced to choose, return, or disappear forever. And that moment draws closer even now. The ages passed like slow-moving clouds drifting across an endless sky. Civilizations rose and fell, empires burned, new nations were built on the ruins of the old. Yet beneath all of it, beneath every border drawn on every map, the ancient division of Earth still whispered its influence. It lived in the way cultures clashed. It lived in the way people felt drawn to certain lands. It lived in the strange feeling that some places on Earth seemed heavier with memory than others. The Anunnaki had never truly left. They had only learned how to become invisible. Deep beneath deserts where no sunlight had touched the stone for thousands of years, their hidden cities still glowed softly with ancient energy. Beneath mountain ranges, vast chambers held machines that could bend gravity, time, and matter. In orbit around Earth, cloaked stations drifted silently, watching the planet spin below. They observed humanity like gardeners watching a wild garden grow. Some saw chaos. Some saw beauty, some saw danger, and Lil watched with growing unease. Humanity was advancing faster than he had expected. They were unlocking the power of fire, then electricity, then the invisible forces that moved through space itself. They were learning how to split atoms, how to send messages through the air, how to leave their own planet. The more humans learned, the closer they came to discovering the truth. And Enlil feared what would happen when they did. In his sky-bound sanctuaries, Enlil began to plan. He no longer wanted humans to be caretakers of Earth. He wanted them to remain controlled. Small, divided, easily guided. So he whispered into the minds of leaders. He fueled fear between nations. He turned difference into conflict. The ancient division of Earth was reborn in modern form, in borders, in ideologies, in endless wars over land and power. Enki saw what was happening. From his hidden sanctuaries beneath the oceans, he felt the shift in humanity's consciousness. He sensed their curiosity growing, their questions becoming sharper, their eyes turning toward the stars. Enki believed this was not a threat, it was destiny, so he began to counter Enlil's influence. He whispered not fear but wonder, not division but discovery. He inspired scientists, inventors, and dreamers. He nudged humanity toward space. He guided them to build telescopes, rockets, and machines that could read the language of the universe. A quiet race began, not between nations, but between gods. The future of Earth hung in the balance. Would humanity become a free species among the stars or remain forever a divided world ruled by invisible hands? Far beyond Earth, Nibiru continued its long journey through the void. Its orbit would one day bring it near again. And when it did, the Anunnaki would have to face what they had created. Some of them wanted to reclaim Earth as a colony. Others wanted to leave it in humanity's care. The old council would have to be called again. But this time humans might be watching, and the ancient map of Earth, the one that divided oceans, skies, and lands, might finally be erased, or it might be enforced one last time. The stars have not yet given their answer, but they are moving, slowly, silently, toward a future that no god, no human, and no world can avoid. The stars have not yet given their answer, but they are moving, slowly, silently, toward a future that no god, no human, and no world can avoid. Across the dark ocean of space, Nibiru continued its long, lonely arc through the void. It was no longer the shining world it had once been. Its skies were thin, its great cities were dim. Vast regions of the planet had been abandoned as its people retreated inward, clinging to what remained of their ancient civilization. The Anunnaki still ruled there, but their dominion was hollow. A world that must constantly be repaired is a world that knows it is dying, and so their eyes never left Earth. From observatories that floated in orbit, from temples buried beneath alien stone, from crystalline halls on Nibiru itself, the Anunnaki watched the blue world turn. They watched clouds swirl, they watched cities grow, they watched human minds stretch beyond the limits once imposed upon them. Some of the Anunnaki felt awe, others felt fear, and some felt hunger, for Earth was no longer a young world. It was rich with life, with energy, with technology, and with a species that was beginning to understand the secrets of the universe. Humanity was no longer a simple tool. It was becoming a power. That was never part of Enlil's design. In the hidden realms of the sky, where the ancient stations drifted behind cloaking fields, Enlil stood before a vast projection of Earth. It was not merely a map. It was a living model of the planet's energy, showing where human populations grew, where industries expanded, where minds were awakening. He could see the old domains still faintly glowing beneath the surface. Enki's waters shimmered. Ninhursag's fertile lands pulsed with biological activity. Inanna's crossroads blazed with commerce and conflict. And Enlil's skies were filled with satellites, aircraft, and machines that were beginning to reach too far. "They are rising too quickly," Enlil said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "They are no longer content with their place." Other Anunnaki stood nearby, their forms tall and radiant in the blue light. Some nodded in agreement, others remained silent, uncertain. "They were never meant to remain small," Enki replied, appearing as a soft glow at the edge of the chamber. "We gave them curiosity, we gave them minds. This is the natural result." "You gave them too much," Enlil snapped. "They were meant to serve the balance, now they threaten it." Enki did not argue. He only looked at the earth and felt something deep within his ancient consciousness. He felt love, not the simple love of a creator for a creation, but the complex love of a parent who knows their child must one day walk alone. "They are not a threat," Enki said quietly. "They are the future of this world." "And what of us?" Enlil demanded. "What of Nibiru? What of our people?" Enki turned his gaze toward the stars. "That future is not meant to belong to us. The words hung in the air like a distant thunder. Far below, humanity continued to live, unaware of the debate unfolding above their skies. They built cities of glass and steel. They sent machines beyond their atmosphere. They gazed at distant galaxies and wondered if anyone was out there. They did not know that someone always had been. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, in chambers older than the pyramids, ancient Anunnaki technology began to awaken. Long dormant systems sensed changes in the planet's magnetic field, in its energy flow, in the patterns of human thought. Signals were sent into space, calling to Nibiru, to the wandering world that had once claimed Earth as its own. The time of quiet observation was ending. The ancient division of Earth was beginning to stir. In places where the Anunnaki had once ruled directly, strange phenomena began to occur. Lights appeared in the sky. Unexplained structures were uncovered by drilling machines. Ancient tablets were found, telling stories too similar across cultures to be coincidence. Humanity was getting closer to the truth, and the closer they came, the more desperate Enlil became. He began to push harder. Wars erupted in regions that sat upon old Anunnaki fault lines. Political divisions grew sharper. Fear was amplified through media, through rumor, through invisible nudges in the human psyche. The goal was simple: keep them distracted, keep them divided. Keep them from looking too deeply into the sky or into their past. But Enki was not idle. Through dreams, through sudden flashes of insight, through the quiet voice of intuition, he guided certain humans. Scientists who felt compelled to search for extraterrestrial signals, archaeologists drawn to impossible ruins, philosophers who questioned the nature of consciousness itself. These humans did not know why they felt the way they did. They only knew that something was calling them, something ancient, something vast. Something that did not belong entirely to this world. The first undeniable signal from deep space arrived quietly, buried within a sea of noise. It was a pattern, not random, not natural. It was a message. Humanity had made contact. The news spread slowly at first, then all at once. The world changed overnight, and far above, the Anunnaki knew there was no turning back. Nibiru was approaching, and when it arrived, the ancient rulers would have to decide: would they reclaim Earth? Or would they finally let it go? The answer would reshape the fate of two worlds, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The answer would reshape the fate of two worlds, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The signal that humanity detected did not arrive as a voice nor as words. It came as a pattern, a long, intricate sequence of pulses that repeated with a precision no natural process could produce. Across Earth, observatories and deep space listening stations recorded it. At first, many scientists assumed it was an anomaly, an error in equipment, or a burst from a distant star. But the pattern did not fade, it grew stronger, it was being aimed. Governments quietly convened. Research facilities went dark as information was classified. The world sensed something was happening, even as it was told nothing. In the hidden halls of the Anunnaki, the ancient instruments confirmed what Enki had long suspected. Nibiru was signaling Earth. The wandering world had turned its gaze homeward. Within the vast chamber beneath the ocean where Enki kept his sanctuary, holographic projections of star fields shimmered. A glowing arc traced the slow, inevitable approach of Nibiru toward the inner solar system. "It has begun," Enki whispered. Ninhursag stood beside him, her form soft with bioluminescent light. "Our people are afraid," she said. "They remember what happened the last time Nibiru came so close." Enki nodded. The gravitational disturbances, the planetary chaos, the disasters that had once reshaped both worlds, those memories were etched into Anunnaki history. "They will want to take Earth," she continued, "to use it as a lifeboat, and Enlil will support them," Enki replied. "He still sees this planet as a possession." High above in the sky-born sanctuaries, Enlil was already preparing. Ancient machines powered on, systems that had been silent since before the flood. Their purpose was not to observe, but to control. If Nibiru returned, Earth would need to be ready, or subdued. Meanwhile, humanity stared into the heavens. Telescopes were ray-aimed. Satellites were recalibrated. More signals were detected, each more complex than the last. They were not random. They were instructions. Some humans began to hear them in dreams. Strange, vivid dreams of towering beings, of glowing cities beneath oceans, of a world that wandered through the stars. They woke with the feeling that something ancient was calling their name. Across the planet, sensitive minds were awakening. The old boundaries between science and mysticism began to blur, and the ancient division of Earth began to fracture. In regions that once belonged to Enki's domain, people reported visions of water and light, of benevolent beings guiding them toward understanding. In the old skylands of Enlil, fear spread more quickly. People dreamed of storms, of judgment, of something descending from above. The gods were whispering again. The approaching presence of Nibiru was amplifying their influence. Deep within a forgotten desert, a group of humans uncovered a buried Anunnaki structure. Its walls were not stone, but a smooth, dark metal that hummed with energy. When they entered, ancient lights flickered on, responding to their presence. They had found one of the old boundary markers, a device that once defined the borders between Anunnaki domains. Earth was remembering itself, and with that memory came danger. Enlil realized that if humans discovered the truth too soon, they would no longer be manageable. So he made a decision that would echo through eternity. He would reveal himself, not openly, not to all humanity, but to those who already held power. Leaders, military commanders, the ones who controlled nations. He would offer them knowledge, technology, and influence in exchange for loyalty. The ancient game of rulers and subjects would begin again. Enki felt the shift immediately. "You are repeating the mistakes of Nibiru," he warned Enlil through the silent channels that connected their minds. "This path leads only to ruin." "Then let ruin come," Enlil replied. "Better a controlled world than a free one that destroys us." Below them, humanity stood at a crossroads it did not yet see. Two ancient forces were pulling at its future, one toward fear and domination, the other toward freedom and the unknown. And far away, Nibiru continued its slow descent toward the light of the sun. The ancient division of Earth was no longer just a memory. It was becoming a battlefield. The ancient division of Earth was no longer just a memory. It was becoming a battlefield. Across the world, subtle changes began to ripple through human society. They were not dramatic at first. No fire fell from the sky. No beings descended in pillars of light. Instead, the changes moved quietly, invisibly, through minds, through dreams, through sudden ideas that seemed to come from nowhere. People felt restless. They felt watched. They felt as if something vast was approaching and no one knew how to prepare for it. Governments increased military readiness without explanation. Satellites were redirected toward deep space. Secret projects buried in the deepest levels of black budgets were accelerated at impossible speed. Strange new materials appeared in laboratories. Designs that no human engineer could remember inventing were suddenly written on chalkboards and digital screens alike. Enlil's influence was spreading. Through the hidden conduits that connected the Anunnaki to Earth, he whispered to those who held power. He did not appear as a god to them. He appeared as inspiration, as sudden certainty, as the feeling that they alone could save their nations from an unknown threat. They did not know they were being guided. They only knew they felt chosen. Enki, meanwhile, walked a quieter path. He reached out not to rulers but to seekers, to the scientists who stayed awake at night staring at strange equations, to the dreamers who felt a longing for the stars, to the children who spoke of other worlds as if they remembered them. He planted curiosity, he planted compassion, he planted doubt. And from these seeds a different future began to grow. Across the oceans, strange lights were seen beneath the waves. Ancient underwater cities, long thought to be myth, stirred as Enki reactivated the old sanctuaries. Their systems hummed with power, preparing for a time when humanity might need to know what lay beneath their own seas. In the skies, Enlil's stations grew brighter, more active. Energy shields flared, defense arrays aligned. If Nibiru came close enough, Earth would be ready to receive it, not as a free world, but as a possession reclaimed. And Nibiru was indeed drawing nearer. As it approached the inner solar system, its gravitational presence began to subtly affect the planets. Scientists on Earth noticed strange shifts in orbital patterns, unexplained tides, seismic disturbances that could not be traced to any known cause. They were witnessing the pull of a wandering world. But what they could not see was the emotional gravity that Nibiru carried for the Anunnaki. It was their birthplace, their cradle, their wound. Many of the Anunnaki who still lived there longed to escape its slow death. They dreamed of Earth's blue skies and living oceans. To them, Earth was not a sacred garden, it was salvation. They demanded action. Within Nibiru's grand halls, voices rose in argument. Some wanted peaceful coexistence, others wanted full reclamation. And a few wanted to erase humanity entirely and start again. Anu, ancient and weary, listened to them all. He knew the truth none of them wanted to face. If they took Earth by force, they would become what had destroyed their own world. But if they let it go, Nibiru might not survive. There was no easy path. On Earth, humanity began to feel the tension. Dreams grew more vivid, more strange. People dreamed of ancient beings, of planets in the sky, of choices that felt larger than themselves. Some woke with tears in their eyes, mourning a world they had never seen. Others woke with fear, convinced that something was coming to take their home. Religions shifted, new movements formed, old beliefs were questioned. The idea that humanity was alone in the universe was fading, and with it the illusion that Earth belonged only to humans. In the deepest reaches of Enki's ocean sanctuary, he stood before a chamber that held the first human genetic records, the blueprint of what humanity was meant to become. He touched the glowing symbols. "They are ready," he whispered. "They must be." Ninhursag stood beside him. "And if they are not," Enki looked up, his eyes reflecting distant stars, "then we will have failed them." Above, the sky shimmered with unseen activity. Below, the earth trembled with ancient memory. And between them, humanity stood unaware, holding the fate of two worlds in its fragile hands. Between them, humanity stood unaware, holding the fate of two worlds in its fragile hands. The first undeniable proof that humanity was no longer alone arrived not through a telescope, but through the sky itself. A vast object, dark and silent, entered Earth's orbit. It did not burn like a meteor. It did not behave like any known satellite. It moved with purpose, sliding into position above the planet like an ancient sentinel returning to its post. The world noticed. Every government detected it. Every observatory tracked it. Every nation asked the same question: what is it? Enlil watched from his sky citadels as the object stabilized. It was an Anunnaki relay station, long dormant, now reactivated by Nibiru's proximity. It had not been meant to reveal itself yet, but time was running out. Enki felt its awakening like a ripple through his consciousness. "They are pushing too fast," he said. "They will frighten the humans." Ninhursag looked toward the stars. Perhaps fear is the only language Enlil still believes in. On Nibiru, the old world glowed faintly as it drew closer to the sun. Ancient engines powered up, preparing vast vessels for the journey ahead. The Anunnaki who lived there packed their histories, their technologies, and their hopes into ships that could cross the gulf between worlds. They were coming. On Earth, panic spread. The object in orbit did not respond to human signals. It simply watched. News outlets speculated wildly. Some called it a weapon, others called it a sign. People looked up at the sky and felt very small, but not all humans were afraid. Those who had been touched by Enki's influence felt something else: recognition. A deep, unexplainable feeling that this moment had been written into their lives long before they were born. A group of scientists, dreamers, and seekers came together, drawn by invisible threads. They called themselves no single name, but they shared a belief that the universe was alive, conscious, and waiting for humanity to step forward. They began decoding the signal. Hidden within the transmissions from Nibiru were layers of information: star maps, mathematical constructs, fragments of ancient Anunnaki language. The message was not a threat, it was a call. Enlil did not like that. He moved quickly. Through his human intermediaries, he ordered the signal suppressed, buried beneath layers of military secrecy. He wanted humanity afraid, not curious, but Enki had already seeded the truth. Some of the decoded data leaked. It spread through underground networks, through the global web of human communication. The idea that ancient beings had once walked on Earth ignited imaginations across the world. People began to ask different questions. Not "are we alone?" but "who were we?" And that question was dangerous. Deep beneath the Earth, the old Anunnaki boundary markers began to activate. They were not weapons. They were anchors, stabilizers that maintained the energetic divisions between domains. As Nibiru approached, the boundaries strained, threatening to collapse. If they failed, Earth would no longer be partitioned. It would become whole. A unified planetary consciousness began to stir. Enlil sensed this and grew desperate. They cannot be allowed to unify, he warned the others. A united humanity will no longer kneel. But they were never meant to kneel, Enki replied. They were meant to rise. The old gods stood divided, just as Earth had once been. Above the planet, the relay station began to glow, its shields flickering as it prepared to transmit again, this time not to humanity, but to the Anunnaki fleet on Nibiru. The final phase was beginning. And on Earth, a young human looked up at the sky and felt a memory that was not his own, a memory of standing on another world, beneath another sun, long before his soul had been born into flesh. The past and the future were converging. The past and the future were converging. The memory that stirred in the minds of certain humans was not imagination. It was resonance, the echo of ancient Anunnaki consciousness woven into human DNA. For long ago, when Enki had helped shape the first humans, he had done more than give them physical form. He had given them fragments of the Anunnaki mind, not enough to remember the stars clearly, but enough to feel them. Now, as Nibiru drew near, those dormant fragments were awakening. Across the world, people began to experience strange moments of recognition. They would stand beneath the night sky and feel as though they had once walked among those stars. They would dream of towering cities of light, of vast oceans beneath alien skies, of councils of beings who looked almost but not quite human. These were not memories of this life, they were memories of another. Enki watched this awakening with both hope and fear. "They are beginning to remember," he said to Ninhursag. "Not in words, but in feeling, and Enlil will try to silence that," she replied. Already the influence of Enlil was pushing harder. Governments passed new laws restricting access to astronomical data. Communication networks were monitored more aggressively. The idea of extraterrestrial contact was framed as a threat to global stability. Fear was being manufactured, but fear could not erase wonder. The object in Earth's orbit began to transmit again, this time in a frequency that human technology could not block. It reached not only machines but minds. Millions of people around the globe felt a sudden stillness in their thoughts, as if the air itself had paused. And then softly an image appeared in their awareness, a blue and green world floating in darkness, watched over by tall, luminous beings. It was not a command, it was a greeting. Humanity was being acknowledged. The reaction was explosive. Some people fell to their knees in awe, others panicked. Many wept, overwhelmed by a feeling of cosmic belonging they could not explain. Enlil was furious. "They are bypassing us," he said. "They are speaking directly to them." "That was always inevitable," Enki replied. "You cannot hide the truth forever." On Nibiru, the fleet was already in motion. Massive ships, each carrying thousands of Anunnaki, lifted from the dying world. Their destination was not a mystery, Earth. But the fleet was not united in purpose. Some ships carried those who wished to live peacefully among humans. Others carried those who intended to reclaim Earth by force. The ancient division among the gods was being carried into the stars. On Earth, the boundary markers continued to destabilize. Their ancient energy fields wavered, weakening the invisible lines that had once separated domains. The planet's own consciousness, something that had been dormant for eons, began to stir. Earth was not just a world, it was an entity, and it was waking up. Enki felt it through the deep waters and the living stone. "The planet itself is responding," he said. "It does not wish to be ruled." Neither, he realized, did humanity. As the fleet closed in, Enlil prepared his final move. He activated the old control systems, devices buried in human neural networks left behind in the earliest days of creation. Their purpose was simple. If necessary, humanity could be subdued. Enki saw this and felt a wave of sorrow. "You would enslave them again," he said. "They are ours," Enlil replied. "No," Enki whispered, "they never were." The first Anunnaki ships entered Earth's outer solar system. Their presence distorted space, bending light and gravity as they approached. The stars themselves seemed to shift. Humanity stood on the brink of revelation. And the fate of Earth hung suspended between ancient rulers and a young species that was just beginning to understand who it truly was. The fate of Earth hung suspended between ancient rulers and a young species that was just beginning to understand who it truly was. As the Anunnaki fleet crossed the invisible threshold of the solar system, humanity felt a subtle but undeniable change in the fabric of reality. Sensitive instruments detected disturbances in space-time. The sun's magnetic field pulsed with unfamiliar rhythms. Even the planet itself seemed to vibrate with a low, almost musical hum that no one could hear with their ears, yet many felt in their bones. Dreams across the world grew more intense. People dreamed of oceans of light. They dreamed of standing on vast platforms above glowing cities. They dreamed of faces that looked human but were touched by something ancient and star-born. These dreams were not random. They were the echoes of the Anunnaki consciousness reaching out, brushing against the human mind. Some humans began to remember past lives not on Earth, but elsewhere, lives lived under different skies in different bodies. They woke feeling both disoriented and strangely complete, as though a missing piece of themselves had returned. Enki stood in his ocean sanctuary, watching the first of the fleet appear as faint points of light in the far reaches of space. "They are bringing their past with them," he said softly. "Their fears, their mistakes, their old hunger for control." Ninhursag's eyes reflected the distant stars. "And what will we bring? Truth," Enki replied, "or nothing." On Earth, the object in orbit began to glow brighter, its ancient systems straining to maintain stability. It had not been designed to mediate between two evolving civilizations. It was a relic of an older time when the Anunnaki ruled without question. Now it was being forced to choose. In the sky citadels, Enlil prepared to assert his authority. He had gathered a faction of Anunnaki who believed that humanity was still too dangerous to be allowed freedom. To them, Earth was a strategic asset, a resource-rich world that could save Nibiru. Their ships were armed, their minds were set, but not all Anunnaki agreed. A growing number, inspired by Enki's vision, believed that Earth and humanity should be protected. They remembered the old wars on Nibiru, the cycles of domination that had led to its slow decay. They did not want to repeat that history. The fleet was divided. As it approached Earth, two destinies traveled side by side. Humanity, meanwhile, was forced to confront the impossible. Governments could no longer hide the truth. The presence of alien ships was undeniable. The skies were filled with anomalies. Communication channels across the globe buzzed with speculation, fear, and wonder. The idea of being alone in the universe died. In its place, a far more difficult question was born. What will they do to us? Some humans wanted to welcome the visitors. They felt a deep sense of kinship, as if the Anunnaki were long-lost family returning home. Others were terrified. They saw the fleet as an invasion force. Enlil's influence amplified the fear. Through subtle manipulation of media and leaders, he pushed the narrative that the Anunnaki were here to take Earth. Enki countered by strengthening the human capacity for empathy and understanding. Those touched by his influence felt a calm certainty that not all beings who came from the stars were enemies. The ancient division of Earth was now mirrored in the division of the human heart. Above the planet, the first Anunnaki vessel entered Earth's orbit. It was massive, dwarfing any human-made structure. Its surface shimmered with living metal, constantly shifting in color and texture. It did not attack. It simply hovered. A signal was sent, not in words, in feeling. Humanity felt a wave of emotion sweep across the globe: sorrow, longing, hope, and something like regret. It was the collective memory of a dying world reaching out to a living one. Enki closed his eyes. "This is their pain," he whispered, "and their chance." The future was no longer theoretical. It was here. The future was no longer theoretical. It was here. As the massive Anunnaki vessel hung above Earth, humanity felt as though the sky itself had become a living presence. People gathered in streets, on rooftops, in fields, and on shores, staring upward in silent awe. The clouds reflected strange lights. The night was brighter than it had ever been. Even the stars seemed to fade in the presence of something so immense. The vessel did not descend. It waited. Within it, Anunnaki councils gathered in halls of luminous crystal. They watched Earth through fields of living light, observing its oceans, its forests, its cities, and the billions of humans who called it home. Some of them felt reverence, others felt impatience. "This world is already alive," said one of the elder Anunnaki. "We should not disturb it." "And yet it was shaped by us," Enlil replied. "It is ours by legacy." Enki stood apart from them, gazing not at Earth's surface, but at the glowing patterns of human consciousness that radiated from the planet like a living aura. "They are no longer what we made them," he said. "They have become something new, that more than anything unsettled Enlil." On Earth, the relay station transmitted again. This time it projected a series of images into the minds of those who were receptive, visions of ancient Mesopotamia, of the first cities, of beings who descended from the sky and taught humanity how to build, how to write, how to look upward. The truth was being revealed slowly and gently like the dawn. Some humans collapsed in tears, others laughed in disbelief. Many simply stared, their sense of reality forever changed. The Anunnaki were no longer myth, they were memory, and they were present. Enlil knew he was losing control of the narrative. he initiated the next phase. Deep within the human nervous system, ancient control codes stirred subtle neurological patterns that had been woven into humanity's earliest ancestors. These were not mind control devices. They were influence structures designed to make humans more responsive to authority, more prone to fear when faced with the unknown. He activated them. Across the world, waves of anxiety surged. Panic spread. People who had felt wonder now felt dread. The presence in the sky began to seem threatening. Enki felt the shift immediately. "You are hurting them," he said. "They are too fragile for the truth," Enlil replied. "Fear will keep them alive." "No," Enki said quietly, "it will only keep them small." The planet itself began to react. Earth's magnetic field fluctuated. Aurora-like lights appeared far beyond their usual regions. The planet was responding to the conflict above it, as though it sensed the tension between the beings who had once claimed it. In the depths of Enki's ocean sanctuaries, ancient crystals pulsed, resonating with the Earth's own consciousness. A connection was forming not between gods and planet, but between planet and people. Humanity began to feel something new, not fear, not awe, but belonging. The sense that Earth was not just a place they lived on, but a living being they were part of. This realization spread faster than Enlil's influence could contain. People felt a sudden urge to protect their world, to defend it, not with weapons but with unity. They were no longer just citizens of nations, they were children of a planet. The Anunnaki fleet watched as a global shift occurred. Humanity's collective consciousness began to stabilize, pushing back against the artificial fear being imposed upon it. "This is what we never anticipated," Ninhursag said. "They are becoming something neither of us can fully control." Enlil stared at the glowing world below, his ancient certainty beginning to crack. Perhaps for the first time in his long existence, he realized that Earth might no longer belong to the Anunnaki at all. Perhaps for the first time in his long existence, Enlil realized that Earth might no longer belong to the Anunnaki at all. The realization unsettled him more deeply than any rebellion ever had. For eons, the Anunnaki had measured time not in years or centuries, but in the rise and fall of civilizations. They had watched worlds bloom and decay. They had guided species like gardeners guiding vines, and now one of those species was pushing back not with violence but with awareness. The human awakening was spreading. In cities and villages across the planet, people felt a quiet but powerful shift within themselves. They became more sensitive to one another, more aware of the living world around them. The oceans seemed to breathe more loudly. The forests whispered. The sky felt closer. The earth itself was teaching its children how to listen. Enki felt this resonance flowing through the waters and the deep stone. "They are synchronizing with the planet," he said. "This was always possible. We simply never allowed it." Ninhursag nodded. Life was never meant to be ruled. It was meant to evolve. Above, the Anunnaki fleet held position. Some ships drifted closer, others remained at a distance, uncertain. Their crews watched the unfolding transformation on Earth with awe and confusion. This was not what they had expected. They had expected fear. They had expected submission. They had expected chaos. Instead, they were witnessing unity. Humanity was not suddenly becoming one single mind, but it was finding a shared sense of purpose. Across cultures and languages, people felt the same truth rising in their hearts. This world is ours to protect. Enlil's control structures faltered. The fear he had seeded was being washed away by something far stronger than programming. Love, connection, belonging. He withdrew into his sky citadel, his luminous form flickering with unrest. "We must intervene," he said to his remaining allies. "If we allow this to continue, they will no longer be manageable." And if we intervene, one of the elder Anunnaki replied, we may destroy the very thing we once came here to save. Enlil turned away. The memory of Nibiru's dying skies haunted him. He could not let his people fade away, not again. Deep within the orbiting relay station, ancient systems began to activate. Energy gathered, fields of force rippled outward. The station was capable of far more than communication. It could manipulate gravity. It could alter climate. It could enforce obedience. Enki sensed the surge of power and felt a wave of sorrow. You are about to repeat history, he said. History is all we have, Enlil replied. On Earth, people looked up as the sky shimmered. The stars seemed to waver. A low vibration passed through the air like the first note of a vast cosmic instrument being played. Some felt fear again, others felt determination. They held hands, they closed their eyes, they focused on the feeling of Earth beneath their feet. The planet responded. A deep pulse of energy surged from the core of the world, traveling through oceans, mountains, and cities. It reached every human heart that was open to it. And in that moment, humanity became more than a species. It became a force. The Anunnaki watched in stunned silence as Earth itself pushed back against the relay station's energy field. The planet's magnetic shield strengthened, bending the artificial influence away. You see, Enki said softly, they do not need us to rule them. They need us to trust them. For the first time since the Anunnaki had arrived on Earth, Enlil was not in control, and the universe was about to find out what happens when gods are no longer the masters of their own creation. The universe was about to find out what happens when gods are no longer the masters of their own creation. The relay station's glow intensified as Enlil poured more power into it. Ancient energy conduits built when the Anunnaki still ruled the stars with unquestioned authority surged with blinding force. The device had once been designed to stabilize Earth during the earliest days of Anunnaki presence. Now it was being twisted into a tool of domination. Space itself seemed to ripple. Across Earth, the sky darkened unnaturally, even in places where the sun should have been shining. The air vibrated. People felt pressure behind their eyes and a strange heaviness in their chests, as though gravity itself had momentarily increased. Yet something remarkable happened. Instead of collapsing in fear, humanity reached inward. They remembered the feeling of unity that had just awakened within them. They remembered the sense that Earth was alive and that they were part of it. Millions of people, without any coordination or instruction, focused on that feeling. The planet responded again. Energy rose from the Earth's core, not as destructive force, but as resonance, a harmony between the living world and the minds that lived upon it. The artificial gravity wave from the relay station met this natural field and weakened. Enlil stared at the readings in disbelief. They are interfering, he said. How can they do this? They are not interfering, Enki replied. They are participating. The Anunnaki fleet watched as the relay station's field destabilized. Some of the ships adjusted their positions, wary of the unpredictable forces now at play. A few captains, aligned with Enki's vision, quietly shut down their weapons. On Nibiru, the old world felt the shift too. The planet's long orbit had brought it close enough that its own energy fields began to interact with Earth's. The two worlds were no longer isolated, they were entangled. Anu, ancient ruler of the Anunnaki, finally spoke. This moment has been coming since the first human opened their eyes, he said. We can no longer pretend that Earth is only ours. Enlil turned to him, anger and desperation flickering across his luminous form. If we do nothing, Nibiru will die. And if we do the wrong thing, Anu replied, so will we. The choice before them was not about power, it was about survival. On Earth, the relay station's influence faltered. Clouds began to break apart. The unnatural darkness faded. People took deep breaths as the pressure lifted. Humanity had pushed back, not with weapons, but with awareness. The Anunnaki who had come to reclaim Earth now saw something they had never seen before, a species capable of defending itself without violence by aligning with the living consciousness of its world. Enki felt a deep, ancient joy. "This is what they were always meant to become," he said. Ninhursag smiled softly, "and what we never allowed ourselves to be." Enlil was silent. For the first time in his long existence, he was confronted with a reality he could not control. The ancient division of Earth was collapsing. The old borders between domains, between gods, between species were dissolving. A new era was beginning, and no one, not even the Anunnaki, could predict where it would lead. The old borders between domains, between gods, between species were dissolving. A new era was beginning. And with that realization, a quiet fell over the Anunnaki fleet, over the orbiting relay station, and over the Earth below. It was not the quiet of emptiness, but the quiet that comes just before a great change, like the moment before a storm breaks or before a seed pushes through the soil and becomes something new. Nibiru loomed larger now, its reddish glow visible even to human telescopes. It was no longer a distant point of light. It was a presence, a wandering world heavy with history, approaching the blue planet that had once been its salvation. From Nibiru, more ships continued to launch. Some carried those who feared extinction. Others carried those who dreamed of a new beginning. And a few carried those who simply wished to see the world their ancestors had once ruled. Earth was no longer a secret, it was a crossroads. Enki stood within the luminous chambers of the great vessel, watching the two worlds draw closer in the vastness of space. "We cannot stop them from coming," he said, "but we can choose how we meet them." Ninhursag nodded. "If we meet them as conquerors, we will lose everything. If we meet them as family, we may yet find a future." Enlil listened, torn between ancient loyalty to his people and the undeniable truth unfolding before him. For the first time, he felt something he had not known in eons: uncertainty. On Earth, humanity was still processing what had happened. The sudden lifting of the oppressive energy field left many shaken but changed. People felt as though a veil had been removed from their perception. The sky seemed brighter, the air felt clearer, even colors appeared more vivid. They had glimpsed something beyond their everyday reality, and they could not forget it. Across the world, gatherings formed. Not organized by governments or religions, but by shared intuition. People came together to talk about what they had felt, what they had seen in their minds, what they believed was coming. Some spoke of the Anunnaki as gods, others as ancestors, others as visitors from another star, but nearly all agreed on one thing: the future of Earth was no longer just a human matter, it was a cosmic one. As Nibiru drew closer, gravitational interactions between the two worlds began to subtly alter Earth's tides and tectonic rhythms. Earthquakes trembled in places that had long been still. Volcanoes stirred. The planet was adjusting to the presence of another massive body in its celestial neighborhood. Yet it did not resist, it adapted. The Anunnaki saw this and were reminded of why Earth had been so precious in the first place. It was not just rich in resources. It was alive in a way Nibiru had long forgotten how to be. Anu convened the ancient council one final time, this time aboard the great vessel hovering above Earth. Anunnaki from both worlds gathered, their luminous forms reflecting the swirling blues and greens of the planet below. "We must decide," Anu said. "Do we cling to the past, or do we step into a future none of us can fully see?" Enlil stood. "If we give up Earth, Nibiru may not survive." "And if we take it," Enki replied, "we will destroy both worlds." A long silence followed. At last, Ninhursag spoke. Perhaps Nibiru does not need to be saved by conquest. Perhaps it can be healed by learning from what Earth has become. The idea was radical, to learn from humans, to allow a younger species to show an older one a new way. Yet as they looked at Earth, glowing with life and unity, many of the Anunnaki felt something stir within them. Hope. And in that moment, the universe seemed to line in, waiting to see what choice the ancient starborn beings would make. The universe seemed to line in, waiting to see what choice the ancient starborn beings would make. Anu felt the weight of countless ages press upon him as he gazed down at Earth. In the light of the blue planet, even his ancient form seemed to soften. This world was not merely a refuge or a resource. It was a miracle, a place where life had learned not just to survive, but to feel, to dream, and to grow beyond its origins. "We came here once because we were desperate," Anu said. "Now we are here again for the same reason, but desperation does not have to lead to destruction." Enlil remained silent, struggling with the conflict within him. He had spent his existence maintaining order through control. To release that control felt like stepping into emptiness. But emptiness was also possibility. On Earth, humanity sensed that something profound was unfolding above them. The sky no longer felt threatening, it felt expectant. People stood together, gazing upward not in fear but in quiet anticipation. They did not know the words being spoken in the Anunnaki Council, but they felt their meaning. Enki stepped forward. "Let us end the ancient division, not only of Earth but of ourselves. Let us become partners with this world, not its masters." A murmur rippled through the gathered Anunnaki. Some nodded, others hesitated. The idea of equality with a species they had once created was difficult to accept, yet deep within their luminous minds they could feel the truth of it. Humanity was no longer just their creation, it was their successor. Nibiru, slowly drifting closer, cast a faint reddish glow across the assembly. It was a reminder of what clinging to old patterns could do to a world. Ninhursag placed her hand over her heart. "We can help Nibiru heal," she said, "but not by repeating the mistakes that wounded it. We must allow life to grow freely." Enlil finally spoke. His voice was quieter now. "And if humanity chooses to reject us," Enki looked at him gently, "then that will be their right." The words carried a power greater than any weapon. Choice. For the first time, the Anunnaki were being asked to relinquish something they had never let go of before: authority. On Earth, a young child looked up at the sky and smiled, feeling no fear, only curiosity. That simple moment echoed across millions of human hearts, reached the Anunnaki like a soft wave of light. They saw themselves reflected in it, not as gods, but as beings capable of change. Anu raised his hand. "We will open a channel to humanity," he said, "not as rulers, but as visitors." The decision sent a ripple through the fleet. The relay station powered down its control systems and reconfigured itself into a communication array. Its light softened, becoming warm rather than oppressive. Across Earth, people felt the shift. A gentle presence settled over the planet, not commanding, not threatening, but inviting. The Anunnaki were ready to speak, and humanity was ready to listen. The Anunnaki were ready to speak, and humanity was ready to listen. The relay station, once a silent sentinel in Earth's orbit, began to transmit again. This time there was no distortion, no hidden layers of control or influence. The signal was clear, open, and filled with a strange warmth that resonated deep within the human mind. People across the world paused, cars slowed on highways, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Millions of eyes turned skyward, not because they were forced to, but because they felt called. The message did not arrive as sound. It arrived as understanding. Each person perceived it in a way their own mind could grasp, as images, as emotions, as a quiet voice, or as a sudden knowing. We are here, we have always been here, and we wish to speak with you. Humanity did not hear a single Anunnaki voice. They heard many, a chorus of ancient beings layered with regret, curiosity, and hope. They were not demanding, they were asking. Enki felt the connection form between the two species, a bridge of consciousness that spanned light years and lifetimes. It was delicate but strong. "This is what I dreamed of," he whispered. Ninhursag watched Earth's biosphere respond to the contact. Plants grew more vibrant, animals became calmer, even the oceans seemed to glow faintly beneath the sun. The planet recognized that something new was being born. Enlil stood apart, listening to the exchange. He heard humanity's thoughts, fear, wonder, confusion, longing, and beneath it all a fierce desire to protect their world. For the first time, Enlil did not hear rebellion, he heard guardianship. The Anunnaki revealed their history not as conquerors but as travelers who had made mistakes. They spoke of Nibiru's decline, of their arrival on Earth, of the choices that had led to the ancient divisions of the planet. They did not hide the truth, they did not justify it, they simply told it. And humanity felt the weight of it. They realized that much of their mythology, their religions, and their oldest stories had been echoes of this forgotten past. The gods of old were not lies, they were memories distorted by time. Some people felt betrayed, others felt liberated, most felt both. Across Earth, people began to understand that their species was part of something far larger than their planet. They were not alone, they had never been alone. But now, for the first time, they were being treated as equals. Anu spoke to humanity through the relay, his ancient presence gentle and vast. "We once divided this world," he said. "We once believed we had the right to shape it as we wished. We were wrong." A hush fell across the human mind. "We come now not to rule but to ask. Will you allow us to share this world with you? Will you allow us to learn from you as you have learned from us?" The question hung in the air like a fragile crystal. Humanity had never been asked something so immense. Nations, religions, and individuals all struggled with the implications. Could they trust beings who had once claimed the earth? Could they forgive ancient wrongs committed before their recorded history? And yet, beneath the uncertainty, a quiet truth emerged. The earth was already changing. Whether humanity accepted the Anunnaki or not, the universe had opened its door. A collective response began to form, not through any single leader or government, but through the shared consciousness of the planet. Humanity, connected through the resonance of Earth itself, began to answer. Yes, not blindly, not without caution, but with hope. Enlil felt the response ripple through the cosmic link. Something inside him loosened. A tension he had carried for eons began to fade. Perhaps he realized control had never been the same as protection. The ancient division of Earth was ending. And a new story was beginning. The ancient division of Earth was ending, and a new story was beginning. As humanity's collective answer rippled outward through the living consciousness of the planet, it traveled beyond atmosphere, beyond magnetosphere, beyond the last shimmering veil of Earth's protective fields. It reached the waiting Anunnaki fleet, touched the hulls of their great vessels, and echoed through the crystalline halls of Nibiru itself. Yes, not a surrender, not a promise of obedience, but a willingness to meet. For the first time in ages, the Anunnaki felt something they had almost forgotten. They felt welcomed. Within the great vessel above Earth, Anu closed his eyes and allowed the sensation to move through him. It was unlike anything he had felt in millennia. On Nibiru, consent had long been replaced by survival. On Earth, he felt a gentle but unwavering boundary. You may come, but you may not rule. And that boundary was stronger than any weapon. Enki felt it too. He felt the planet's consciousness like a vast ocean of awareness, each human mind a wave upon its surface. The waves were different, sometimes clashing, sometimes calm, but together they formed something whole. "This world has found its voice," he whispered. Ninersag watched the biosphere respond. Forests pulsed with subtle energy. Migrating animals changed their paths as if guided by invisible currents. The planet itself was adjusting, not in fear but in preparation. Enlil stood very still. For ages he had been the guardian of order, the keeper of skies and boundaries. Now the greatest boundary of all had been set without his command. He could feel the old control structures embedded in humanity fading, dissolving like mist in sunlight. They were not being destroyed by force, they were being outgrown. "This is what it feels like," he said quietly, "to become unnecessary." Enki looked at him with compassion. "No," he replied, "it is what it feels like to become something else." Above Earth, the great Anunnaki vessel slowly altered its position. Its immense bulk, once held rigidly above the planet, now drifted slightly as though bowing. Energy fields reconfigured, weapon arrays powered down. The vessel was no longer postured for control, it was postured for arrival. Smaller craft began to detach, gliding gracefully through space. They were not landing yet, but they were drawing closer, preparing for a first contact that would be physical as well as psychic. Earth humanity watched the sky with breathless anticipation. The relay station's glow softened into a gentle halo. The presence above felt no longer oppressive but curious. In countless minds, images formed of beings tall and luminous, their eyes filled with ancient stars. People felt that these were not invaders, they were travelers. Somewhere on the planet, a woman sat beside a quiet lake, her hands resting on the cool earth. She felt a presence near her, not in her body, but in her awareness. A voice, gentle and deep, spoke without sound. "We once walked here." She did not feel fear. She felt recognition, as though meeting a distant relative whose face she had only seen in dreams. Children across the world began to draw pictures of beings in the sky. They drew ships, stars, and glowing figures standing beside humans. They did not draw monsters, they drew friends. Nibiru continued its slow approach. The dying world was now close enough that its faint light could be seen by human eyes through telescopes, a reddish orb drifting through the darkness like a wounded heart. It carried with it the weight of Anunnaki history, the scars of their old mistakes, and the desperate hope that this time they might choose differently. Within Nibiru's grand halls, voices argued less and listened more. They could feel the earth's resonance even from afar. It was like hearing a melody after centuries of silence. "We are not alone in the universe," one Anunnaki elder said softly. "We forgot what that meant." The two worlds were now linked, not just by gravity, but by consciousness. The closer Nibiru drew, the stronger the connection became. Earth and Nibiru began to share subtle energetic exchanges as if sensing one another's presence. Earth did not recoil, it reached out. In the depths of the oceans, Enki's ancient sanctuaries glowed brighter, their crystal matrices harmonizing with the planet's awakening. In the skies, Enlil's old stations powered down their control systems and converted themselves into observation and communication hubs. The old infrastructure of domination was being repurposed into something new. The Anunnaki fleet shifted formation. Those vessels that still carried weapons now held them in dormant state. Those that carried knowledge, culture, and people moved to the forefront. The intent was clear. They were coming not to conquer, they were coming to meet. On Earth, human leaders struggled to keep up with the pace of events. Traditional power structures suddenly felt small in the face of a cosmic moment. Some tried to assert control. Others quietly stepped back, sensing that this was no longer a political matter. This was a planetary one. People gathered in open spaces, in fields and on hills, in deserts and by oceans. They felt called to be outside under the open sky. The planet seemed to be guiding them, pulling them into alignment with something vast and gentle. The first Anunnaki craft began its descent. It was smaller than the great vessel, but still enormous by human standards. It glided through the atmosphere without sound, its surface shimmering like liquid starlight. No flames, no smoke, no thunder, just a quiet arrival. The craft settled above a wide, open plain, its presence bending the air around it like heat on a summer day. As it touched the ground, the earth did not tremble. It welcomed. A door opened not with a mechanical hiss, but with a soft unfolding of light. From within, a figure stepped forward, tall, luminous, shaped like a human, but clearly not one. An Anunnaki stood upon earth for the first time in ages. The humans who had gathered felt their breath catch in their throats. Some cried, some laughed. Some simply stood in stunned silence. The Anunnaki raised one long, glowing hand, not in a gesture of command, but in greeting. Enki watched through the shared field of consciousness, his ancient heart filled with something like joy. "This is how it should have been," he whispered. The figure spoke, not aloud, but into the minds of all who were present. "We come in peace. We come in humility. We come to learn who you have become. No threats, no demands, only presence." Humanity did not kneel. They stepped forward. A man, trembling but determined, took a few slow steps toward the glowing being. He did not carry a weapon. He carried a simple offering, a small plant, its roots wrapped in soil, a piece of earth. The Anunnaki looked at it with wonder. A living symbol of a world that had grown beyond its ancient rulers. Nibiru watched from afar as this simple exchange unfolded. A dying world witnessing a living one choose compassion over fear. Within Anu's vast awareness, something shifted. We were never meant to be gods, he realized. We were meant to be ancestors, and ancestors do not rule the future, they bless it. The ancient division of Earth was gone. In its place stood a planet ready to write its own story, with the stars not as masters but as neighbors. And so, beneath an alien sky and a human sun, two civilizations began to meet, not across the barrel of a weapon, but across the open space of curiosity. The universe exhaled. A new chapter had begun. The universe exhaled. A new chapter had begun. The Anunnaki who had stepped onto the earth remained still, allowing the moment to settle. Around them, the open plain shimmered with subtle energy as the two worlds adjusted to one another's presence. Wind moved gently through tall grass. Clouds drifted slowly overhead. Even the sky itself seemed to pause, as though witnessing something sacred. Humans continued to approach, not in a rush, but in a slow, cautious wave. They came from every direction, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Some carried flowers, some carried nothing at all. Many carried tears in their eyes. The Anunnaki felt it all. They felt the fear, the awe, the longing, the fierce protectiveness humans felt for their world. They felt the planet's steady heartbeat beneath their feet, a living rhythm that no machine or empire could ever truly command. Enki watched through the shared field of consciousness, sensing how the Anunnaki's ancient assumptions were dissolving in real time. These were not the fragile beings Enlil had once feared. These were not tools, nor servants, nor experiments. These were partners. Ninhursag felt it too, in the way the Earth's biosphere responded to the Anunnaki presence. Plants lined subtly toward the luminous visitors, not in submission, but in recognition. Life was acknowledging life. Enlil remained within the sky citadel, observing the unfolding scene with a complicated storm of emotion. He had expected chaos. He had prepared for resistance. Instead, he was watching a miracle of restraint and grace. Perhaps, he realized, control had always been a poor substitute for trust. On Nibiru, news of the landing spread through the vast halls and domed cities of the dying world. Anunnaki who had spent centuries trapped beneath fading skies gathered around glowing projection pools, watching Earth's blue-green surface and the small, luminous figure standing among humans. Some wept, some felt hope for the first time in generations. Nibiru had been a world of survival for too long. Now, for the first time, it saw a future that did not depend on conquest. Back on Earth, the Anunnaki visitor knelt slowly and deliberately, bringing themselves to a level closer to the humans who had gathered. The gesture was not meant to diminish them, but to show respect. "We are grateful to stand on your world," the being transmitted gently. "We are grateful that you have allowed us to come." The words resonated through the minds of those present, translated not by technology but by shared understanding. A woman stepped forward, her voice trembling as she spoke aloud. "Why did you come back?" The Anunnaki paused, feeling the weight of that simple question. "We came because our world is dying," the being replied, "and because yours is alive. We came because we once made choices here that shaped your past, and now we wish to make different choices that will shape our future." The honesty of the answer rippled through the crowd. Some humans felt anger stir, some felt compassion, some felt both. A man spoke next. "Do you want to take our planet?" The Anunnaki's luminous eyes softened. "We do not wish to take what is not ours," the being answered. "We wish to share, if you will allow it." That was the moment when something irreversible happened in the human heart. The realization that the universe did not have to be a battlefield, it could be a community. Above, the great Anunnaki vessel shifted again, opening vast bays that revealed cities within cities, habitats glowing with soft light. These were not warships, they were arks. The Anunnaki were not coming to replace humanity. They were coming to survive alongside it. Enki felt a quiet triumph. This was the future he had always hoped for, even when he dared not speak it aloud. Humanity had grown beyond the role of creation. It had become co-creator. Ninhursag began preparing the first biological integration protocols. They were not meant to alter humanity, but to allow Anunnaki physiology to adapt to Earth's rich, living environment without harming it. The days of reshaping worlds to suit themselves were over. Now they would reshape themselves. Enlil descended from the sky citadel for the first time in ages. His luminous form moved through the atmosphere like a slow-moving star. He watched the scene below with an expression that no Anunnaki had ever seen upon him before: humility. He felt the ancient weight of his decisions, the wars, the divisions, the centuries of control. He felt the echo of Nibiru's mistakes and the fragile promise of Earth's future. Perhaps he realized the true purpose of a guardian was not to command, it was to let go. As Enlil approached the plane, the humans felt another presence join the field, deeper, more intense, carrying the energy of storms and skies. Some flinched instinctively, others stood firm. Enlil stopped beside the first Anunnaki. "I once believed this world belonged to us," he said, his voice reaching both human ears and human minds. "I was wrong." A hush fell. "I believed order could only be maintained through control. I was wrong about that too." He turned toward the humans. "You have shown us something we forgot, that a world is not owned by those who arrive first, but by those who care for it." The admission sent a wave of emotion through the Anunnaki fleet and through humanity alike. The ancient Lord of the Skies was stepping down, not from existence, from dominion. Earth's resonance deepened, as though the planet itself acknowledged the shift. Anu watched from above, feeling a quiet pride in the way even his most stubborn kin had finally chosen growth over fear. "This," he said softly, "is what evolution looks like." Nibiru, drifting closer, seemed to glow faintly brighter, as if sensing the change in its people. The old world, too, was being offered a new story. The Anunnaki began to move forward, not in columns or ranks, but in small groups, each guided by curiosity and wonder. Humans met them halfway, forming circles rather than lines. No one was in charge, everyone was present. Under the shared sky, humans and Anunnaki spoke, through words, through thoughts, through laughter and tears. They shared stories of lost worlds and new beginnings. They compared myths and memories. They discovered how deeply intertwined their histories truly were. The ancient division of Earth had not merely ended, it had transformed into connection. And as the two species began to truly see one another, the universe took note. A young species had taught an ancient one how to begin again, and in that lesson both Earth and Nibiru found a chance at healing. The story was far from over, but for the first time in a very long time it was moving in a direction no one had ever dared to imagine, together. The word lingered in the shared field of consciousness like a soft bell tone that slowly faded into something deeper and richer. Humans and Anunnaki stood beneath the same sky, breathing the same air, feeling the same gravity pull at their bodies and their thoughts. For a long while no one spoke, no one needed to. The moment itself was speaking for them. Then the earth answered, not with sound, not with movement, but with a subtle, luminous shift in its own energetic fabric. Those who were sensitive felt it first, a gentle rising as if the planet were stretching after a long sleep. The forests, the oceans, the mountain ranges, the deep molten heart of the world all seemed to align into a single, coherent presence. Earth was aware. It had always been aware in its own slow and patient way, but now it was fully awake, responding to the meeting of its children and its ancient visitors. The planetary consciousness reached outward not just to humanity, but to the Anunnaki as well, touching their minds with something both ancient and young. Welcome, it seemed to say. But also, this is my home, Enki felt it first. The connection was like plunging into a vast living ocean. He felt the planet's history, volcanic fire, primordial seas, the first cells dividing, the first creatures crawling onto land. He felt the rise and fall of countless species. He felt the fragile, fierce emergence of humanity, their struggles, their wars, their art, their longing for something beyond themselves. He also felt the planet's boundaries. Earth was open, but it was not passive. Ninhursag gasped softly as the planetary awareness brushed her own. "It is conscious," she whispered. "Every world is," Enki replied. "We just forgot how to listen." Enlil felt it too, and it shook him to his core. For so long he had believed that worlds were territories, places to be governed and shaped. Now he felt Earth as a living being with its own will, its own deep intelligence. He had been trying to rule something that could never truly be ruled. Anu, watching from the great vessel above, closed his eyes as the planet's consciousness reached him. In that moment he felt the weight of Nibiru's long decline and the sharp contrast of Earth's vibrant life. The difference was not merely in resources or atmosphere, it was in relationship. Nibiru had been dominated by its rulers for too long. Earth had been allowed, at least partially, to grow. That difference had made all the difference. On the surface, humans were still coming forward, slowly, cautiously, each step guided by instinct rather than instruction. They spoke with the Anunnaki in clusters, exchanging words and images, trying to bridge the vast gulf of experience between a species born on a single planet and beings who had crossed the stars. Some humans asked about Nibiru. Some asked about the ancient times, about the cities beneath deserts and oceans, about the gods of old. Some asked the simplest and most important questions. Can we trust you? The Anunnaki did not answer with promises, they answered with stories. They spoke of their own mistakes, of the wars that had scarred their homeworld, of the fear that had driven them to seek control instead of cooperation. They spoke of the beauty they had lost and the lessons they had learned too late, and as they spoke, humanity felt something shift. These were not flawless gods, these were flawed beings, not so different from themselves. The great Anunnaki vessel began to lower itself slightly, descending closer to Earth's atmosphere. Its immense form glowed softly, reflecting sunlight and starlight alike. It did not loom in menace, it floated in quiet respect. Within it, entire ecosystems waited, gardens grown under artificial suns, oceans held in vast crystalline chambers, habitats designed to sustain Anunnaki life for centuries. They were prepared to live in orbit, not to settle on Earth's surface, honoring the planet's sovereignty. At least that was Enki's hope, but not all Anunnaki were at peace with this plan. Within the fleet there were still factions who believed Earth should be claimed more directly. They watched the scenes on the surface with unease, seeing not harmony but vulnerability. "We are giving up too much," one of them said within the shared Anunnaki network. "This species is young, unstable. How can we entrust our survival to their goodwill?" Another replied, "Because we have already tried every other way." The debate was far from over. On Nibiru, the ancient world felt the pull of both hope and fear. Its people had lived under a sky that was slowly thinning, under suns that no longer warmed their world as they once had. To them, Earth was not just a new home. It was a miracle, but miracles are fragile. Back on Earth, Enlil took a step forward, approaching the humans who had gathered closest to the Anunnaki. His presence was still powerful, still intense, but no longer overwhelming. "I was once your god of storms," he said, his voice resonating through both air and mind. "Your bringer of thunder and law. I am not proud of all that I did in that role." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "I thought fear was the only thing that could keep a world from tearing itself apart. I was wrong. You have shown me something stronger." A young woman, her hands trembling, raised her voice. "What will happen now?" Enlil looked up at the sky, at the great vessels, at the distant red glow of Nibiru. "Now," he said, "we will try something none of us have ever truly done." "What?" someone asked. "Listen." The word seemed simple, but in it was contained a revolution. Above, the Anunnaki fleet adjusted its formation. Ships that had once been poised for conflict now aligned themselves into a protective arc around Earth, not as a cage, but as a shield against the hazards of space, rogue asteroids, radiation storms, cosmic debris. They were not enclosing the planet, they were guarding it. Human scientists, watching from observatories and control rooms, realized what was happening. The data was unmistakable. The alien fleet was altering its trajectory and energy output in ways that could only be interpreted as defensive. They're protecting us," one whispered. "Yes," another replied, "and maybe themselves too." Earth was becoming a sanctuary, not just for humanity, but for two worlds. Enki felt a deep, quiet relief. This was the future he had imagined, though he had never dared to believe it would truly come to pass. A shared space, a shared sky, a shared responsibility. He reached out through the planetary consciousness, touching human minds with a gentle presence. Not guiding, not commanding, but offering. "You are not alone," he conveyed, "and you never have been." Humanity responded not with words but with feeling, a surge of gratitude, curiosity, and cautious hope that flowed back through the connection. The bridge between species strengthened. Nibiru, now close enough to be seen clearly even without powerful telescopes, glowed in the sky like a wounded ember. Its people watched Earth's blue light and felt something like longing. Soon, some of them would come, not as conquerors, but as refugees, neighbors, and perhaps, in time, friends. The universe, vast and ancient, watched the two worlds draw closer, not just in space, but in spirit. It had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, countless species destroy themselves through fear and greed. This was something new. A moment when two intelligent worlds chose cooperation over conquest. The story of Earth and the Anunnaki was far from finished. But it had taken a turn that no prophecy, no ancient tablet, and no star map had ever fully foreseen. It had turned toward possibility, And in that turning, both humanity and the Anunnaki stepped into a future that was no longer written by the past, but by the choices they were making together right now, beneath a sky that held more than just one kind of life. And that, perhaps, was the greatest miracle of all. It was the greatest miracle of all. The two worlds, once bound by hierarchy and secrecy, were now bound by something far more fragile and far more powerful: mutual recognition. Humanity and the Anunnaki stood on the edge of an era that had never existed before, an era in which the past no longer dictated the future. Yet even as hope spread across Earth and through the Anunnaki fleet, the universe was never so simple as to allow transformation without challenge. Far beyond the orbit of Nibiru, in regions of space where light itself seemed thin and distant, ancient forces took notice. They were not Anunnaki, they were not human, they were something far older. Long before Nibiru had become a wandering world, long before Earth had cooled from molten rock into blue seas and green continents, there had been civilizations that crossed galaxies as easily as humans crossed oceans. Some had risen, and some had fallen, and some had never truly gone away. Among them were beings who watched the unfolding of life across the cosmos as one might watch a game, a grand experiment of intelligence and evolution. The union of Earth and the Anunnaki did not go unnoticed. It sent a signal into the deeper layers of reality, not through technology, but through resonance. Two worlds choosing cooperation created a harmonic that rippled through the fabric of the universe itself, and harmonics attract attention. Within a region of space that no human telescope could ever reach, a vast consciousness stirred. It was not a single being, but a collective, a network of minds that had learned to exist as one. They were known by many names in many ancient myths, though none of those names could fully capture what they were. They had watched Nibiru long ago. They had watched the Anunnaki rise, and they had watched them begin to fail. To these ancient observers, the Anunnaki's attempt to partner with humanity was not a sign of growth, it was a sign of weakness. A lesser species has become influential, one of the minds within the collective observed. This alters the balance. Yes, another replied. If young worlds begin to unite with elder ones, the old hierarchies will collapse. The collective did not fear chaos, they feared loss of control. For countless ages they had quietly guided the rise and fall of civilizations, ensuring that no single species ever became too powerful, too independent, or too unpredictable. A united Earth and Anunnaki alliance was unpredictable. It had to be managed. Back near Earth, no one yet sensed the distant attention that was now turning toward them. Humanity and the Anunnaki were still focused on the wonder of their meeting, on the practical challenges of sharing a system, on the delicate work of building trust. Anu convened another gathering aboard the great vessel, this time with human representatives invited to join through the shared field of consciousness. They were not physically present, but their minds were linked, allowing them to participate in the conversation. This was unprecedented. Human voices, human thoughts were being heard alongside ancient starborn beings. We need to talk about Nibiru, a human scientist said, her presence steady and curious. What will happen to your world? Anu did not hesitate. Nibiru is dying, its atmosphere is thinning, its core unstable. We can slow the process, but we cannot stop it without outside assistance. And you want Earth to provide that? Another human asked. No, Anu replied. We want cooperation, knowledge. Shared solutions. Perhaps together we can find a way to heal what was broken. The idea of helping an alien world heal itself was staggering. Humanity was only just beginning to understand its own planet, and yet something within them responded to the challenge. Enki felt it, the same instinct that had once driven humans to look beyond the horizon, to cross oceans, to reach for the stars. They wanted to help, not because they were obligated, but because it felt right. Ninhursag began sharing information about Nibiru's biosphere, about the technologies that could stabilize planetary systems, about the delicate balance between geological and biological processes. Human scientists listened, their minds racing with possibilities. They were no longer students being taught by gods, they were collaborators. Enlil watched the exchange with a complex mix of emotions. He had once believed humans too fragile, too chaotic to be trusted with such responsibility. Now he was watching them engage with the survival of an entire alien world with compassion and curiosity. Perhaps he had underestimated them. On Earth, news of the collaboration spread. People were no longer just spectators to cosmic events. They were participants, volunteers for a future that included more than one kind of life. Artists began to paint visions of Earth and Nibiru connected by bridges of light. Children dreamed of traveling to another world. Philosophers and thinkers debated what it meant to be human in a universe now known to be alive with intelligence. The planet itself seemed to thrive under the weight of this new awareness. Environmental healing accelerated. Species on the brink of extinction began to recover. It was as if Earth, sensing that it was no longer alone, was finding new strength. But far away, the ancient collective was preparing. They had seen this pattern before. Young civilizations, when given too much freedom, could grow too quickly. They could disrupt the careful equilibrium that the collective had maintained for eons. The Earth-Anunnaki alliance was already doing that. It must be tested, one of the minds within the collective declared. If it fails, it fails. If it survives, then perhaps it is worthy. The test would not be gentle. The first signs of interference were subtle. Small anomalies in space-time began to appear near the outer edges of the solar system. Unexplained energy fluctuations rippled through the region. The Anunnaki fleet detected them almost immediately. "These are not natural," Enki said, studying the data. "Something else is here." Anu felt a chill run through his ancient consciousness. He recognized the signature. "They have noticed us." "Who?" a human voice asked through the link. "Those who believe the universe should remain divided," Anu replied. "Those who fear what we are becoming." Earth, Nibiru, humanity, and the Anunnaki were no longer alone in this story. The universe had begun to respond, and the next chapter would test not just their alliance, but their very understanding of what it meant to coexist in a cosmos that was far older and far more complex than any of them had imagined. Yet even in the face of this looming uncertainty, one truth had already taken root. Earth was no longer a colony, it was a partner. And partners, when they stand together, can face even the deepest darkness with something no empire has ever truly possessed: hope. It was a quiet thing, almost fragile, yet it carried a strength that neither the Anunnaki nor humanity had ever fully understood until this moment. Hope was not a weapon. It did not bend space or crack planets, but it did something far more dangerous to any force that thrived on control. It made beings willing to change. As the Earth-Anunnaki alliance deepened, the shared field of consciousness that linked them began to grow richer and more complex. Humans who had once only sensed faint whispers of cosmic awareness now felt entire currents of thought and memory flowing through their minds. Not overwhelming, not invasive, but like standing in a vast library where every book was open, waiting to be read. Enki guided this process gently. He knew how easily minds could be flooded by too much knowledge at once. He created filters, layers of perception that allowed humans to access Anunnaki understanding in ways that did not shatter their sense of self. "This is how we will learn together," he told the council. not by turning them into us or us into them, but by allowing each mind to grow at its own pace. Ninhursag worked alongside human biologists and ecologists, sharing insights about planetary health that spanned millions of years. She showed them how Nibiru's decline had begun with small imbalances, minor disruptions to its atmosphere, tiny shifts in its core that had slowly compounded until they became catastrophic. You must never forget, she told them, that a world is a living system. When you wound it, it remembers. Humans listened. For the first time in their history, they were being taught by beings who had already lived through the consequences of planetary neglect, and they were determined not to repeat those mistakes. Earth began to change in ways that were both subtle and profound. With new knowledge and a renewed sense of purpose, humanity accelerated its efforts to heal the planet. Energy systems became cleaner. Technologies that had once been considered impossible were developed in months instead of decades, not because the Anunnaki gave them everything, but because the Anunnaki showed them what was possible. Meanwhile, Nibiru drew ever closer. Its wounded atmosphere shimmered faintly as it approached the inner reaches of the solar system. Anunnaki scientists and human engineers began working together to design massive stabilization fields that could be deployed around the dying world, protecting it from further atmospheric loss and buying time for deeper healing. The two species were not just talking, they were building. But in the deeper layers of space, the ancient collective was watching. They observed the rapid evolution of the Earth-Anunnaki alliance with growing concern. The harmonics created by their cooperation were spreading, altering the subtle balance of power that had governed the galaxy for eons. These young worlds are becoming too influential, one of the minds within the collective said. They are no longer isolated. Isolation is the key to control, another replied. Connection is dangerous. The collective began to shape a response. They did not send fleets. They did not declare war. They did something far more insidious. They sent doubt. Across the shared field of consciousness, small disturbances began to appear. Subtle distortions in perception, like static in a signal. Humans began to feel moments of unease. Anunnaki felt echoes of their old fears. What if this alliance fails? What if the humans betray us? What if the Anunnaki still intend to take our world? These thoughts did not originate in any single mind. They were being planted. Enki felt the shift almost immediately. Something is interfering, he said, his voice tight with concern. This is not coming from within us. Anu studied the energy patterns. The old watchers, he said, they are testing us. Testing us how? A human asked. By seeing if we will turn on one another, Anu replied. The ancient collective had learned long ago that fear could do more damage than any weapon. They knew that if they could make humanity and the Anunnaki distrust each other, the alliance would collapse from within. Earth, however, had learned something new. The planetary consciousness, now fully awake, began to sense the subtle manipulations. It felt the distortions like tiny thorns in its energetic field, and unlike before, it did not ignore them. It responded. The planet's resonance deepened, becoming more coherent, more unified. The shared field of consciousness between humans and Anunnaki strengthened, creating a kind of immune system against external interference. Enki smiled softly. Earth is learning to defend itself. Humans felt it too. When moments of doubt arose, they were quickly balanced by waves of connection and trust. People began to talk openly about their fears instead of hiding them. Anunnaki shared their own uncertainties, their own regrets. The alliance became more honest, and honesty was its shield. The ancient collective increased its efforts. They sent more complex distortions, weaving illusions into the shared field. Some humans began to see frightening visions of Anunnaki as conquerors. Some Anunnaki dreamed of humans rising up against them, but each time these visions appeared, the planet's resonance and the growing bond between the two species weakened their power. "We are stronger together than we are afraid," a human voice said through the link, and it was true. The collective realized that this alliance was not breaking as easily as they had hoped. "Then we must escalate," one of the ancient minds decided. Far out in space, beyond the orbit of Nibiru, something began to form. A vast construct of energy and matter, shaped by intelligence far older than either Earth or the Anunnaki. It was not a ship in the conventional sense. It was more like a moving region of altered reality, capable of bending the laws of physics around it. It was a test, a challenge. The collective sent it toward the Earth-Nibiru system, not to destroy, but to force a choice. Enki felt its approach like a shadow passing over his awareness. "Something is coming," he said. "Something very old." Anu nodded. "They want to see if we will stand together when it truly matters." Humanity and the Anunnaki had faced fear, doubt, and ancient mistakes. Now they would face the universe itself. And the outcome would determine not just the fate of two worlds, but the future of cooperation among all intelligent life. Yet even as the unknown drew closer, Earth's people did not retreat. They stood, they listened, they reached for one another, because hope once awakened is not so easily extinguished. And in the vast, ancient darkness of the cosmos, that simple truth was more powerful than any force that sought to keep the stars divided. The simple truth was more powerful than any force that sought to keep the stars divided. The vast construct sent by the ancient watchers drifted closer, its presence bending space like a slow, silent tide. It did not roar or flash. It did not announce itself with violence. It simply arrived, enormous and incomprehensible, a moving region of altered reality that pressed against the boundaries of the Earth-Nibiru system like a question the universe itself was asking. Are you truly united? Enki felt its weight in the deep waters of his consciousness. Ninhursag felt it in the living web of biology. Enlil felt it in the skies and electromagnetic fields, and humanity felt it too, as a strange stillness that fell over the world as if time itself were holding its breath. Even Nibiru trembled. The wounded world's atmosphere shimmered as subtle forces pulled at it, testing its stability. The great stabilization fields that humans and Anunnaki had begun constructing flickered, not failing, but struggling against an influence far older and more complex than anything they had encountered before. Anu stood within the luminous heart of the great vessel and spoke into the shared field of consciousness that now bound all of them together. "This is the moment," he said. "The Watchers wish to know if we are merely speaking of unity, or if we truly embody it." On Earth, people gathered in silence, some in city streets, some in fields, some by oceans and mountains. They did not know the technical details of what was approaching, but they felt its significance. The sky looked the same, yet everything felt different. A sense of being observed not by eyes, but by something vast and patient. The construct moved closer, its altered physics brushing against Earth's magnetic field, against Nibiru's fragile atmosphere, against the Anunnaki fleet. Small fluctuations rippled through space. Instruments detected impossible readings, yet nothing broke, not yet. The Watchers were not here to destroy, they were here to provoke. Within the shared consciousness, whispers began to rise again, subtle, insidious. What if this alliance costs you your world? What if these ancient beings still mean to rule you? What if humanity is only a temporary convenience to them? The doubts came as they always did, but this time something was different. Humans did not turn inward, they turned outward. They spoke to one another openly, honestly, across every boundary that had once divided them. They shared their fears, they shared their hopes, they shared their desire to protect their world and to explore the universe without losing their humanity. The Anunnaki did the same. They spoke of their guilt, of their mistakes, of the longing they felt for a future that was not defined by decay and domination. Earth listened, and Earth answered. Planetary consciousness surged, not in anger but in coherence. A powerful, harmonious resonance flowed outward from the core of the planet, through its oceans and continents, into the shared field that linked humans and Anunnaki alike. It was a declaration: we stand together. The Anunnaki fleet aligned around Earth and Nibiru not as a barrier but as a living bridge. Their ships synchronized their energy fields with the planet's resonance, amplifying the signal of unity. Nibiru responded too. Despite its wounds, the ancient world sent out a faint but steady pulse of its own, a testament that it, too, wished to be part of something greater than its past. The Watcher's construct paused. Within its vast, incomprehensible structure, the ancient collective observed the response. They had expected conflict. They had expected fracture. They had not expected harmony. Two worlds, once bound by hierarchy and fear, were now acting as a single system, planet, species, and starborn beings moving in resonance rather than opposition. The test was being passed. Slowly the construct began to recede. Its presence faded like a shadow at dawn, retreating back into the deep layers of space from which it had come. The Watchers had seen enough, for now. A wave of relief and quiet triumph spread through the shared consciousness. Earth's skies brightened. The subtle pressure that had hung over the world lifted. Nibiru's atmosphere stabilized, its fragile systems no longer under immediate threat. The universe had acknowledged their choice. Anu let out a breath he felt he had been holding for thousands of years. "We are no longer alone," he said, "not in the way we once were." Enki felt a profound peace settle over him. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges, there would be mistakes, but the foundation had been laid for something new. A civilization of worlds. Humanity looked up at the sky and felt something it had never felt before. Not insignificance, but belonging. And somewhere deep within the living heart of Earth, the planet itself seemed to smile. The story of the Anunnaki and humanity did not end there. It was only just beginning. And if you enjoyed this journey through ancient stars, lost worlds, and the awakening of a living planet, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Leave a comment and tell me what part of this story stayed with you the most, and let me know where in the world you're watching from. Until the next dream beneath the stars, may the universe always feel a little closer.